All right, so Saturn. Very interesting planet we have here with Saturn. It is mostly known for its rings. So Saturn, it takes Saturn 29.5 Earth years to orbit the sun. And we talk a lot in astrology about Saturn returns. So what that means is where Saturn was on the day you were born, you'll note its degree. Okay. So then in approximately 29.5 years, Saturn will go completely through the zodiac and back to the exact point where it was on the day you were born. And that is called your Saturn return, when Saturn returns to the same spot. All right. So and we'll talk about once we get into what Saturn means, that'll make a little bit more sense for the things that might come up during your Saturn return. But you actually likely will have multiple Saturn returns throughout your lifetime. One when you're around 30, one when you're around 60, and if you live to 90, that will be your third Saturn return. So very interesting energies here. We talk about returns with other planets too, like Jupiter returns, Venus returns, Mars returns. They're just a little bit less significant, I guess we could say, because they happen a little bit more frequently or like on a shorter cycle. So the things that, can play out over 30 years are a lot more significant than the things that could play out over a shorter period of time. Anyway, all right, so 29.5 years to orbit the sun. The inner core of Saturn here is like a slushy metallic core. So I think that's very interesting, especially if you think about like Saturn being associated with Capricorn energy. I like to say that, like Capricorns are hard on the outside, but are like squishy on the inside. And then I learned that Saturn has a slushy core. So I was like, yeah, of course it does. Because it likes to talk a big game, but in the middle it's all like slushy. I'm like, oh yeah, that's cute. I think that's cute. Anyway, so Saturn has 124 moons. Crazy. So more moons than Jupiter, which is interesting and potentially important to consider. I do think like doing honestly like research more into the moons of these planets would probably be important to understand astrologically as well. But maybe that's for a future timeline. It likely is. I don't think it's that significant at the moment, but it does play a role. So Saturn's moon Titan actually has its own atmosphere, which is wild for a moon to just literally have its own atmosphere. All right, Saturn has seasons like Earth that last a little more than 7 years. It has no solid surface, so you couldn't like land on Saturn, and expect anything notable to happen. Seven rings on the outside. They are made of ice and dust. Some people have talked about like diamonds forming in their rings. I'm not quite sure how accurate that is, but I always thought that was kind of interesting. The seven rings likely formed when a moon got too close and was ripped apart and like turned into the rings then. And the rings will eventually disappear as they are being pulled into Saturn. And something to consider energetically, if something has energy and you put a ring around it, it holds in that energy. Okay, so yeah, so think about that however you want to, in regard to rings and like containing energy, because there were thoughts of like Saturn potentially having, if it would have just like been not had a ring around it, it may have turned into a star. So we're not really sure. But anyway. And rings can really kind of come off as like restriction in a way. I mean, you can also see it as like concentrated energy, but it's also definitely like restricting energy then too. All right, so Saturn astrologically, it deals a lot with karma, maturity. So a lot of maturing happens. Basically, if you hit like 29, 30 when your first Saturn return comes around and you have not matured and you are not stepping into adulthood, you're gonna get your ass kicked by Saturn. And that's like Saturn being like, hey, you had all of these opportunities to get it together and you still decided to like fuck around. So now you're gonna find out. That's actually really a perfect analogy for Saturn. Saturn is You wanted to fuck around, now you're gonna find out. Now things get real, now things get serious. Like you wanted to go party over with Jupiter, but now we're on Saturn and it's gonna be a little bit tough. You know what I mean? Very much get to work, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, don't cry about it, just fucking do it. And that's a really Saturnian energy at the end of the day, which some people love and some people are like, that's hell, which it kind of can be. But it's a balance. So anyway, structure, order to life, order of society, self-control, self-mastery. This can play into your life purpose, your work ethic can be looked at with Saturnian energy. Your legacy, like how you want to be remembered on this planet. Authority, and this can be authority issues too. Like, let's say if you had your Mars and your Saturn conjunct or like squaring each other, you might have a really big authority issues or like really want to fight the system or something like that. Creating boundaries, we can see justice here as well. So creating boundaries with other people, but also for yourself. So one of the things about Saturn, it's like it shows you where the boundary is, but it shows you where the boundary is so that you can push it to find where your boundary actually is. It also likes to deal with time. So sometimes like your boundary one day might, let's just say like you were running, you're training for a marathon, okay? So your limit or your boundary when you first start training might be like 5 miles. When you start like really, really going, maybe you are, 12, 13 weeks into training, all of a sudden your new limit is 17 miles, okay? So from one to another, like you can expand your boundaries, and but like it doesn't just happen, it happens over time in order to find where your new boundary is. All right. So long-term goals and decision making can come to Saturn energy. So it definitely, Saturn likes to reward long-term decision making. It absolutely hates like get rich quick schemes or anything like that. The more effort and energy you put into like Saturnian energy, the typically the longer you will be able to sustain whatever you put that work into. Let's see. Cause and effect, wisdom or gaining wisdom can be found here. Ethics, being an ethical human. Time, again, dealing with time, however that means to you, that can mean a lot of different things. Mastery of the mind and routines, personal limits, your career, contracts, that can look like a lot of, that can be marriage contracts, that can be business contracts, that can be a, signing a lease for an apartment, that can be literally anything that you go into contract under. Growth and development. So you will typically get like a lot of lessons in order to teach you and to help you grow. Some of them can feel really shitty and really painful. And I'm not gonna sit here and like gaslight society because there's definitely a lot of situations that have been like too dark and like gone too far down different paths that like shouldn't really even exist within humanity, but it does. So but it's like what I'm saying is I don't think it was always like that. Like I think that there certain things have gone too far. But anyway, so personal responsibility not only to yourself but to society. So like what are you contributing to society? Saturn would love to know. Because if you're not really contributing anything, then you're not really going to be blessed by Saturn. But if you do work hard and if you, show up every day, show up on time, show up like with a can do, we'll get this done, like this has to, happen attitude, Saturn will reward you for it. But if not, Saturn will kick your ass. So you better hope Jupiter's on your side to get lucky, right? But like even let's say like if you win the lottery with Jupiter if you don't have like the maturity or the order of life and or like structure and work ethic and purpose to do something with that money, you're probably just gonna blow it and then who knows, right? So yeah, anyway, you get it. So that's Saturn. And very interesting on the bottom of Saturn, we see the hexagon of Saturn. So the six-pointed star of Saturn, which Can mean a lot of different things. So jot that down. All right, Saturn. And then Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius, both of them. But Aquarius is also ruled by Uranus. So the major associated energy with Capricorn, or with Saturn is then Capricorn. All right. Cool, cool, cool. And again, this is a social planet. So most of these things will end up dealing with other people. I do think like your Saturn return has a lot to deal with you, but also you in relation to society and like how you are contributing and how you are becoming an adult, becoming a contributing member versus just like, we figuring it out. All right, Saturn. Cool.